This is what happens when you talk to the dead. What you just heard was a real recording made in 1971 by a Latvian psychologist named Konstantin Raudive. He believed those were the literal voices of the dead, captured inside his tape recorder. I didn't believe it either, until I found something that changed my mind completely. Stay with me, because what happened in that room still can't be explained. This story starts with a tape, one that was never supposed to be heard again. A tape labeled Session 12, Do Not Play. It was buried in an archive for over 50 years until I pressed play. Konstantin Raudive wasn't a ghost hunter. He was a doctor of psychology, a former student of Carl Jung. In the late 1950s, he started hearing faint human voices in white noise. Voices that responded directly to his questions. He called them electronic voice phenomena, or EVPs, and by 1971, he had cataloged over 70,000 separate recordings. Most people dismissed them as pareidolia, random noise mistaken for speech. But Raudive insisted the dead were learning how to talk back. In one of his final sessions, he left his microphone running overnight. When he played the tape back, he heard something he couldn't explain, a woman's voice speaking his full name, followed by a sound like breathing. Waveform animation. Highlight faint pattern labeled human range. Subtle whisper effect. The voice said, Konstantin, you shouldn't have called. Then silence. That was the night Raudive stopped recording for good. Half a century later, I found myself holding that same reel, Session 12. It wasn't supposed to exist. But there it was, inside a box marked for disposal, at a university archive in Stockholm. When I pressed play, the sound that came through my headphones didn't match any of his previous EVPs. It wasn't static. It was rhythmic, almost like breathing through water. Then faintly a voice. Female whispering in English this time. Who's there? The exact phrase is documented in Raudive's original notebooks, but that recording was in German. I cross-referenced the waveform. It was identical to Raudive's 1971 file, down to the frequency pattern. But this one had a digital timestamp, 2023. I assumed it was a hoax. Maybe someone re-recorded it. But when I checked the magnetic oxide degradation on the reel, it was authentic. The voice wasn't added later. It was there from the start. And then something happened that I can't explain. I rewound the tape to replay the phrase, and before it finished, another voice spoke. This one said a name. Quietly. That's when I stopped the recording. I sat there for maybe 10 minutes, completely still. I thought maybe it was my mind, or a bleed from an old digital file. But the reel had never been digitized. Whispered. And that's when I realized Raudive hadn't stopped recording because he was done. He stopped because something was answering. Who were they? What were they trying to communicate? Next is a story, The Bither Files, The Entity Case, 1974, a real documented haunting investigated by parapsychologists Dr. Barry Taff and Carrie Gaynor in Culver City, California. After the Raudive tapes, I started digging through other historical investigations involving recorded voices, cases where someone tried to make contact and something came back. That search led me to a case so disturbing that even the scientists involved refused to talk about it for decades, the Doris Bither haunting, also known as the Entity Case. In August 1974, a single mother named Doris Bither claimed unseen forces were attacking her inside her small home on Braddock Drive. Not noises, but full physical assaults. When investigators arrived, they expected another exaggerated haunting. What they documented instead, including photographs of light anomalies hovering over her body, became one of the most controversial cases in parapsychology. According to their notes, Doris would enter what she called a communication trance. She said she was talking to the men who died here before me. Her son told researchers that the air temperature would drop moments before each event. Dr. Taff recorded ambient room noise on a reel-to-reel Nagra recorder, hoping to capture raps or movement. But when they played the tape back, there were low male voices, whispering answers to their own questions. One voice, slowed down, clearly said, "Leave, she is ours." That line appears in the official lab transcript, page 6, entry number 41. When I compared that waveform to Raudive's 1971 session 12 recording, The patterns were almost identical. Same breath spacing, same modulation rate. Different continent. Different witnesses. Same voice pattern. Which raised a terrifying possibility that the entity Doris spoke to might have already been talking to someone else. Dr. Taft later wrote that during one investigation night, bright arcs of light erupted across the room, like flashes from an invisible camera. Multiple witnesses saw it. The film negatives show curved streaks suspended midair. The team left microphones running overnight. The next morning, the recorder contained 37 seconds of heavy breathing and a single female scream. Doris was asleep in another house that night. Taft ended the study 2 weeks later. Official reason: subject relocation, uncontrolled phenomena. Unofficially, he later admitted, quote, something there started acknowledging us by name. I obtained a copy of that final audio. The background is matches Rodov's reel. And just like his session 12, it ends with one faint line, almost polite. Hearing it in my headphones, I felt the same pulse, that underwater breathing. For a moment, I thought I heard my own echo coming back. I visited the original house on Braddock Drive. The new owners let me record ambient noise for comparison. The building's been remodeled, but the energy in that back bedroom felt heavy, charged. My EMF recorder, the same model used by Taft, spiked twice, both times when I asked the same question Rodov had asked 50 years earlier. Who's there? Through the static, the recorder caught 3 syllables. Faint, but clear enough for a forensic audio match. The voice that answered me inside that house had the same signature as the 1971 tape, Rodov's own. That's when I realized the dead weren't just talking through machines. They were using us, people, as the medium. Every time someone listened, it grew stronger. Another event, the Philip experiment, creating the dead. By the mid-1970s, researchers stopped asking if we could talk to the dead. They started asking a different question. What if the dead we're speaking to aren't dead at all? In Toronto, a group of scientists, psychologists, and engineers formed the Society for Psychical Research of Ontario. Their goal was to test whether belief itself could conjure a ghost. They invented a character named Philip Aylesford, a 17th century English nobleman who supposedly died after a tragic affair. He never existed. They made him up for months. The group met every week in a dimly lit room, talking to Philip as though he were real. They described his castle, his servants, his horse. They even printed his portrait. For a long time, nothing happened. But in the fall of 1973, the table began to tremble. Then it knocked, once for yes, twice for no. The group claimed the knocks responded intelligently. Ask a question, get an answer. Ask about details from Philip's fictional life. The responses matched the story perfectly. All sessions were filmed under bright light to eliminate trickery. In the footage, you can see the table move on its own. The researchers published their results in 1974. Their conclusion: collective focus and shared imagination might manifest measurable psychokinetic energy. But buried in the appendix was something stranger, a note about an uninvited voice. During one session, a low male tone was caught under the table knocks. It wasn't part of the group responses, and when slowed down, it formed a name. The same one I'd already heard on Rodov's tape and in the Bither audio. The report's author, Dr. Iris Owen, dismissed it as a recording artifact. But a technician's memo in the archive notes something different. Voice repeated after equipment shut down. That detail stuck with me, because Rodov's tape had also kept recording after power loss, capturing those same 3 seconds of whispering breath. To confirm the link, I tracked down one surviving participant from the Philip sessions, a woman named Margaret Singleton, now in her 80s. In soft, respectful tones, she agreed to speak to me, but only off camera. Her first words were, "You found the tapes, didn't you?" When I asked what she meant, she said, "After we stopped, something kept coming. We heard it through the vents." I thought she was referring to ordinary noises, building sounds, maybe. But then she added something I'll never forget. It started saying our names backwards. Margaret mailed me an envelope before the interview ended. She said she wanted nothing more to do with it. The envelope was sealed in red wax, labeled only, "For the one who listens." Inside was a small cassette tape. No markings, no leader tape, just 46 minutes of low static. When I played it through headphones, I recognized the same low breathing from Rodov's reel. But then a new sound joined in, a rhythmic tapping, exactly 6 beats apart. I lined it up with Rodov's Session 12 and Doris Bither's recordings. All three matched that rhythm perfectly. Not just the same pattern, the same timing, within milliseconds. The odds of 3 independent analog recordings sharing identical interference patterns? Statistically impossible. Whatever was happening across decades, countries, and different people, the signal was consistent, like someone leaving breadcrumbs through history. Margaret refused further contact. The next week, the return address on her envelope was vacant. The property sold months earlier. That's when I decided to digitize the cassette for analysis. The moment the waveform rendered, my software froze for 3 seconds, then displayed 3 words I hadn't typed. At that moment, my recording equipment spiked. The same echo feedback Rodov reported in 1971, a loop between the mic and an unseen source. Every instinct told me to stop, but curiosity, or maybe something else, pushed me to listen one quietly. And beneath the static a voice whispered, "You shouldn't have followed them." That was the same phrase Rodov claimed to hear before ending his experiments. 50 years apart. Different format, same message. When I compared all recordings side by side, Rodov's reel, Bither's room tape, and the Philip cassette, a pattern emerged. The 3 messages, aligned chronologically, spelled a sentence. In a soft and unsettled tone, it wasn't communication anymore. It was an invitation. For the conclusion of this episode, the voice, when I first heard that phrase, "You shouldn't have followed them," I thought it was a warning. But what if it wasn't? What if it was an acknowledgement? For weeks, I kept replaying the tapes, trying to find meaning. Every breath, every crackle of audio. But something else started to happen. Each time I listened, I noticed a low tone under my own voice, a kind of drone that wasn't there in the original file. When isolated, that drone formed into a recognizable cadence. 6 beats silence, then 6 beats again. The same pattern from all 3 cases. At exactly 6 beats apart, the pattern stretched across a timeline. Rodov in 1971, Bither in 1974, and Toronto in 1973. But if you align the time codes by signal phase, the messages overlap perfectly. When synced, the 3 messages don't play in sequence. They play together, forming a complete sentence, whispered across half a century. It wasn't 3 ghosts. It was one continuous voice, reaching through every experiment, every microphone. I ran the waveform through spectral mapping, and a pattern appeared in the noise, not random, structured. It spelled coordinates. At that point, I realized what had been staring at me the entire time. The first voice, the last voice, the same origin. Some people believe Rodov became part of the frequency he studied, that his consciousness survived in electromagnetic resonance. If that's true, he might not just have heard the voices, he joined them. And when I listened again, slowing the audio to 1/8 speed, I could hear his voice, faint but clear, saying, "Now you listen." At that moment, every light in my workspace flickered once, the exact same timestamp as the whisper. It wasn't scary. It was final, like the end of a long conversation that had been waiting decades for an answer. That's when I did something I probably shouldn't have. I spoke into the mic and said, "If you can hear me, stop." The room went quiet for 3 seconds. Then, just once, a single knock. Calmly. That's the clip you saw at the start, the 3-second response. The moment the experiment ended itself. After the static, I donated all original tapes to the Latvian National Archive in Riga. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from the curator. He wrote, "There's a 4th tape you didn't send, but we received it anyway." The envelope contained an audio reel identical to Rodov's, but labeled with same name. I haven't played it. Because if Rodov was right, playing it would mean one thing. I've already joined the conversation. If you made it this far, you've already heard what they wanted you to hear. But the next mystery starts in 72 hours. Text on screen. Next mystery drops in 72 hours.